Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissick.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Hey, Dana. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Other than you said having to deal with people issues today.
All day. It's
All
been
day.
like one of those days where it's like one after the other. But I did want to tell you, I just got back from Austin and it was so great to hear. Yes, I still have to tell you about that. But it was so great to hear several other top operators that listen and love our podcast. Like it got brought up multiple times.
That's great. That's fantastic. Oh, and by the way, did you have the one request I had of you? Did you get it done?
No, I did not get it done. He said yes. And I said, how do I schedule? We're trying, for those of you wondering, we're trying to get Gary on the podcast. We've been trying and he's agreed. It's just scheduling conflicts, to which the response was, my schedule is very packed right now.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll just keep bugging him. We're very tenacious. We're very tenacious.
Right.
We will promise you all we'll somehow get Gary on here.
Yes, that's right. It was great though. His ranch was beautiful. I text you, like I said, I'm adding ranch to my vision board.
Yes.
I mean, the animals that he has is what blew my mind. Like oryx, I think is what they're called, from Africa. I mean, like herds of them running everywhere.
There must be some kind of like weird tax thing for exotic animals or something. I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know. It was wild, but I did want to give a shout out to Al Donahue, who's an OP up north. And he just made my day because he was like, I never miss an episode of you all. And I share it with everybody I know. And so I said, well, thanks for sharing it. And we actually, our flights got delayed super late when we were getting there. And because it was crazy weather going on. And we were in the Uber line and his Uber canceled and he was like, Dana, because we never met in person. He said, are you Dana? I said, yeah. He said, I listen to you all every single week. I was like, come hop in my Uber. And so we talked about the podcast, but
I'll get him a super fan shirt.
Yes, we will. We for sure will.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, we'll have to do an episode just on everything you learned and observed being 2 days with Gary at the ranch.
Yeah, we will. Well, we weren't at the ranch the whole time. We were just at the ranch for like fellowship and dinner and activities, and the rest we were at the office. But it was really good. Lots of real estate, just the landscaping of real estate is changing all the time. But particularly faster now than kind of how it ever has before. And I think a lot of that is AI. A lot of that is, just the industry post-pandemic. I mean, so many things. So it's interesting to see just how quickly things are changing, which my big aha was how quickly we have to continue to pivot over and over and over. I mean, it's just change. We have to be willing to change all the time.
Yeah, so true. Well, I can't wait to dig into that one. So you and I also a couple of weeks ago spent a couple of days in Highlands, North Carolina.
Yep.
Such an amazing opportunity. And we started with lunch with John Addison, which is I'm like a super fan of John Addison. He's so funny.
Too. I have not gotten over that. Like, I just want to like hang out with him all the time.
Yes. And I think we'll have to figure that out. And he also said he'd do the podcast. So we're going to get some amazing guests on this podcast.
Yep. He's coming. We're working on scheduling him.
Okay, perfect. And then also you and I spent time with John Maxwell and Dr. Henry Cloud. And so today we wanted to talk a little bit about his new book, Trust, which he's going to come on the podcast also. So we won't tell everything, but I thought we could there's 5 points he says that are important for you to be trusted or for you to have trust. And we'll take each of those for a week and dive into them and kind of talk from our own experience, any experiences we have with that. And then what does that mean to us moving forward now that we know this, right? I always like to say, once you know something, you can't pretend you don't. But I loved one of the things
eye-opening. Oh my gosh, very eye-opening.
One of the things I love that he said, because I think he's like I always say, if a message comes to me 2 or 3 times and it comes from very wise people, pay attention, right? And he said that all of his books come from the one-on-one work he does with business people and things like that. and one of the books was trust. And I guess he probably saw lots of lack of trust and how, and I've said this over my career. I've watched people, in my case, operating principals or people who, or whoever, agents or whoever, once they lose trust, it is almost impossible to get it back. And I don't think we emphasize enough, losing trust, because I have watched it like tear down relationships that should have never been tore down. I mean, but the minute people don't trust someone, I don't know that you can get that back. So, I think it's something we should pay more attention to, right? Because I think it can happen and we don't realize the collateral damage of it. And we don't realize the actually opportunity cost it costs on the backside when we lose trust with either our partners or our agents or anybody. So we're going to take trust today. There was actually 5. Trust was number 1. I think ability was number 2.
Understanding was number 1.
Sorry, understanding was number 1.
Yeah. And actually I had motive as understanding. And then I had motive as number 2. He kind of went out of order a little bit. And then ability, I think, was number 3. And then he mixed those up, because remember, he gave us character and he said that's actually the fit. So I think it was understanding, motive, ability, track record, and then character was the last one. Yeah. And so, they were also great.
Yeah, being understood was number 1. And it's interesting because I think I've told this on the podcast before, but I spent some time, probably 6 or 7 months ago, with Chris Voss, who was one of the lead negotiators for the FBI, or hostage negotiator. And he and Dr. Henry Cloud said something very similar about people wanting to be understood. And it was so funny because my first question to Dr. Henry Cloud was the same first question I had for Chris Voss. And that is, one of the number 1 characters of someone feeling like you understand them is that you have empathy.
Right.
And so my question to Dr. Henry Cloud, and it was also my question to Chris, but I love the way Dr. Henry Cloud answered it better. He actually freed me up so I can stop asking people this question now. But the question was this. I said, look, I asked Chris Voss, do some people have more empathy than others? Because I feel like I have empathy if someone's in a situation that they can't control, or they got there without something they could have controlled. But I feel like I'm faking empathy when it's for someone who I feel like made decisions and have consequences and could have changed their outcomes. Does that make sense?
Yes, but can you give an example of that, just for somebody that's like, I don't know what that means? Like when you say something happened to them out of their control, like what would be an example of that?
Well, let's say they're in poverty and they're a small child and they don't really have control over how to fix that. But then they're an adult and they stay that way because they make choices. So that would be 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. Yeah. So Dr. Henry Cloud, he answered it best for me in a way that freed me up. Right. And he said, Linda, it's not about you. What you're having empathy for is how they see it and how they feel.
Right.
And that changed everything for me, because I'm thinking I have empathy about the whole where they are and the circumstance. And that's not the case. The case is I can have empathy for what they think and what they're feeling, and still not feel like they could do something, get out of that situation. So my daughter always says to me, you don't understand me. I mean, like almost every debate we get into, let's say. And I've never really understood what she's saying, because I'm thinking, well, that's silly. Of course I understand you, right? But what I hear now differently after Dr. Henry Cloud explained it that way is I'm not having empathy for how she sees it or how she feels. So this has been a huge game changer for me, because I was hearing understood as different. Yeah, I was hearing understood as something completely different. And I was hearing empathy as something completely different. So to understand someone, you have to have empathy. For them to feel like you understand them, they have to feel like you you can have empathy for how they feel or think or whatever, even if it's not how you feel or think. And that's where I was stuck. So this was a huge, I mean, this is one of those, this goes right up there with Gary Keller asking me, did I want the job or do I want my people to have the job?
Or did you want Brad to have? Yeah.
It's a real game changer for me.
Do you think
so
do you think that when she was saying, you don't understand me, you were taking that as you just didn't agree with her?
Well, I think it was more, I don't agree. Okay, so let me think how to put this. I don't agree with how maybe it would be handled. I feel like if the situation, whatever the situation is, I would handle it differently. And so that's another thing he helped me with too.
Yeah.
Sometimes we make other people's problem our problem.
Right.
And this was a huge thing too, because he rode home on the plane with Diana and I. And he said, look, this person doesn't have a problem. You have a problem. I'm like, really? Oh, they really got a problem. He said, no, they don't have a problem. Yeah, they do have a problem. And what I'm doing is foreseeing a problem they don't have yet.
Right.
And people don't solve a problem until they have it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the situation going, this is going to be a problem, right? But it's not a problem yet, right? And so he calls it letting people put their trash on your side of the fence.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so sometimes we might see an agent or a person that works for us or someone else that we can kind of see the situation and we make it our problem because we want to solve it before it's their problem. And we can't solve any problems. It's not their problem. So he was a huge game changer for me. It was, I don't even know how to put a price on what that was worth to me.
I know it was so much more. Well, a couple of things that I thought of when he said this. Okay. So number one, trust is in life and in business. And sometimes I think I tend to think that it's one way in business and it's one way with your family, or it's one way here and it's one way there. And it's really not. Trust is trust. And I love on the front of his book, he says the book is about knowing when to give it, when to withhold it, how to earn it, and how to fix it when it gets broken, because there's so many layers of trust. So when he talked about these 5 things that we're going to talk about, and he talked about understanding being first, he said, when we trust someone when we feel like they understand me and they actually get me, because nobody is really listening until they feel like that they are understood. So that's why it all starts with understanding.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. And I immediately saw the issue that my daughter doesn't feel like I understand her because I'm not really having empathy for how she sees things and and the differences, right? I keep wanting to it to be the way I think it should be, right? And that doesn't help at all. Yeah, I really think that and which we're going to dig more into the book when he comes on. We'll get more into some of that. I don't know when you withhold it. He didn't cover that with us. So I can't ever imagine, but I guess you would probably be in situations when you're not really sure about someone that you're withholding the trust until you get all the other,
you get it. Yeah.
You get all 5 components, right?
Yeah. Because he said they go in order. And another thing I thought he said, the reason why understanding is number 1 in trust is because it's the first thing that has to hit the button to turn green and go, because we actually have, I'm going to screw this up, but we had something about, we have mirror neurons in our brain, and they can actually feel like, are you with me or are you against me? Do you understand me? Or do you not understand me? And he said that comes with empathy, like you've talked about, listening someone's tone. And so he said that's why the first thing is you have to understand somebody and they have to feel that they're understood, because he said also on the business side, when people feel understood, then they can perform at a much higher level. And technically, if you don't feel understood, your brain actually tells you to kind of pull back and hold back from really performing at your full potential and or capacity, because you don't really feel like you're understood, basically was what he said. And I thought, gosh, that makes so much sense. But the problem that I have is sometimes it's in order to feel, and I guess this is your empathy thing, in order for someone to feel understood, even if if I was trying to make somebody trust me or build trust and they wanted to feel understood, but I really didn't even agree with the way that they were being or acting, or maybe even they were being a victim, I have a tendency to be like, okay, well, this just isn't a relationship that's going to work, instead of probably going in and saying, okay, well, let me really see how I could understand, even though I don't agree with your perspective.
You're saying exactly the same problem I had. But here's the thing, I think, because a lot of times in especially in my leadership role, sometimes we'll have two people come to us and they don't agree and they don't see eye to eye. I will totally handle that different now moving forward. The very first thing I will do is try to get them to understand each other's thoughts, anything like that. Because I think we do tend to associate, I don't agree with this, I wouldn't handle it that way, blah, blah, blah. And that shuts off all communication. Whereas and I've always said this, I said, I've never met a person I didn't like that I took the time to get to know. Right.
Yeah. So true.
So I think in my leadership role, I will no longer allow two people to have a disagreement without some kind of opportunity for them to come together and understand each other.
Yeah. It's almost go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, I think that's the missing piece. Yeah.
It's almost like that when they come together, it needs to start with, okay, like, tell me how you're feeling and like what would make you feel understood. Now tell me how you're feeling and what would make you feel understood, so that everybody can feel, see each other's perspective first.
Yes. And it's kind of freeing, I think, because I think on the other side of us for me to re-understand this differently, I look back and think, what have I screwed up in the past by not understanding this at this level? Or what opportunities have I closed the door down to because of this? Right. Yeah. So it was huge. And I knew it was important because I've watched from the outside looking in, I've watched it cost people that just cannot trust each other on both sides so much opportunity. And you're like, oh my gosh, if you two could just stop this. And for whatever reason, they can't because they've never bothered to understand each other. Yeah.
Do you think it's because sometimes, I don't know, like I was going back through my notes, he said, now he did say, actually, here's one thing. He did say, somebody asked the question, how do you get trust back if they don't own the situation? And that's where sometimes I find it hard for myself, because one of the things that I feel like you and I both do really well, and I only do it well because you really taught me to do it well, is like, where's our DNA? And a lot of people can't do that or won't do that. And so then if they're not owning it, and he really said, you can't really start to build trust if they're being a victim or they're not accepting any responsibility. But you can say, I want to figure out a path to move forward and rebuild trust. And right now I don't feel comfortable because the problem is never with you. And so how can we, which I thought was a great script, because that's where I struggle. Like that's what I mean by victim mode. Like there's no fault. They cannot find their DNA anywhere in the situation. And I thought that was really good. And he said you can do that even with your business and your personal life. But what I was going to say to go back to is, he said, what did he say? I was trying to find it because it was so good. Something you just said. Oh, he said it's just about defining reality, and you may have to go through a few bumps, but he said sometimes a vacuum is better than a cancer. And so a lot of times, like when you said about those two people that just couldn't ever get it and it could have been so great, it's because somewhere like there was a cancer that they weren't willing to like fight through. And so he said if you can't do that, then that's how two people will never get back together. And then he said something else about C-suite level. Remember, he said he sees so many leaders in like C-suite levels get to like status quo, but only 90% of them actually go to the very top. So kind of like a John Addison. I mean, so many people could have kept that company at that level, but went to the very top. And he said that the difference maker was like their ability to deal with trust and to do the 5 things that we're going to talk about. And that was a huge eye opener for me, because even if you're not good at them, working to get better at them, will just make you a better leader in general.
Well, and I think there's always frustration when you work with people, but the difference is, I always say the difference between reaction and response. I'll usually have a horrible reaction about something that I think is crazy, or the people are crazy or whatever. But am I willing to say, okay, that's my reaction, but I got to go in curiosity and really truly try to understand this person and let them feel understood so that we can move forward, because we're not going to move forward. But I think, and what I loved about when I was asking about the empathy to help them feel understood, because empathy is such a huge part of people feeling understood.
Yep.
And he was explaining to me that you're not being soft on the situation. So you could have a tough situation and you could say, I know it must be frustrating. You must be feeling horrible. I know whatever, because you do know that's how they're feeling or whatever, but not be light on the situation being what it is. And I think I put the two together and thought if I was easy on this, I was going to be, I was easy on the part that we can't be easy on, right? We got to get change. We got to get movement. We got to get something, and back to something you said about family. I always, as a leader, I'd always say to people, like, if I couldn't get them to see something, I'd say, okay, here's what I want you to do. Visualize that's your kid.
Yeah.
How do you handle this situation? Because we never want to lose trust from our kids or, things like that. So a lot of times I would say, okay, let's take the business mode out of it. And let's just pretend these are your kid. This is one of your kids. What would the tone be like? How would you try to get them to self-discover? How would you try to understand them? What would you do differently than you're doing right now? And I think sometimes if they can get them in that mode, because a lot of people think business is over here, life is and families over here
separate,
but I think they're the same.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, and I mean, the question I asked him was how, like, I can be so much better with boundaries and trust and confrontation in business side, but not as much in family side. And it made me feel better just to hear that he said that's kind of normal.
Yeah. I think you're too close to the situation.
Yeah.
When it's family.
Yeah. And I wrote down something great that he said about that. He said, I'm trying to find it in my notes. He said something like, you can, here it is. He said, it's different because you care for your employees, but it's a different heartstring when it's with your family. And that's what makes it totally normal.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that for a second. For some people, it might be easier to have boundaries with family, and some people it might be easier to have boundaries with business.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think sometimes with family, we get into a situation and we're so far into handling it a certain way. I think the hard part is to go back and handle it now a different way.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, where's all this training when you need it? Right? You get it after you're like, crap, I needed this. I mean, to me, this is right up there with fierce conversations.
Totally. That's what I thought the whole time.
About trust and boundaries. And by the way, we haven't even got to his boundaries, so we'll make him talk about his boundaries book also. But learning those things, oh man, I wish you learned them in high school or somewhere much sooner.
Yeah. I totally agree, which is why it's great that we went to support John Maxwell's values in school curriculum, because we can get that in more schools. That'll hopefully help. But yeah, for those of you listening, to prepare for the next few episodes and to prepare for when we have Dr. Henry Cloud on, Trust, his new book. And then before that, he had, I believe, Necessary Endings. And then before that was Boundaries. But you can check out all three of those books. And they're all great.
I don't know if you told this while you were with me or if it was on the plane. He actually had one that was similar to Fierce.
No.
Conversations you don't want to have or something like that. He has 47 books.
Wow. Yeah. I did not know he had 47.
47.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Yeah. I just know the big three. But wow, that's incredible. Gosh, now I'm going to want to go look up all of them.
Yeah. So true. Any last thoughts about is there any time in your life, Dana, that you felt like someone understood you? And is there any time when you felt like somebody didn't understand you?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been both. And when I think about the times that I do feel understood, I think it's when people know how to ask really great questions. Well, I mean, honestly, that's really the difference, not to be too personal, but I think that's the difference between Adam, like my now marriage versus my first marriage, would be, I feel like Adam, I know that he understands me. And I think the big reason is because he asks great questions and he makes me feel, I don't know if like safe is the right word, or we just, but definitely it has to do with like they ask questions, which is really the understanding part. And then also I think too, when I know that I feel understood, well, it's just, we're not going to talk about it on this one, but just to give a sneak peek, because we already said it, number 2 is their motive. And that's really important to me. Like, that's one of my values, is someone's motive, like knowing that they have a true motive. And if I can feel like the motive is true, then I feel much more understood than when the biggest time I don't feel understood is just when it's like victim, or it's like someone's own agenda that they're trying, you know what I mean, trying to accomplish. Because I just think all those things violate my values. And so I immediately just kind of shut down.
Well, and I think what we've learned from him is we no longer can jump straight to that conclusion when we feel that way about someone, without saying, what did I do to try to understand them better? And then if we went through the whole process of understanding them and then we still felt that way, I think that would be okay, the check mark to say, okay, we can't move this forward. But like Fear says, is you're not responsible for their response. You're only responsible for what you initiating the opportunity.
Totally. Yeah, awesome. Totally.
Well, great conversation. I can't wait to hit the other 4. And I certainly can't wait for us to get Dr. Henry Cloud locked down to be our guest on this podcast.
It's kind of like counseling, going through all this stuff.
Yeah, don't worry. Hey, that's a great idea. If you have a question about boundaries, trust, necessary endings, any of those things, send them to us at info@everything life and real estate, and we'll just hit him with all of them. In my situations, I told him, I have a friend, and hypothetically, if this friend, he said, yeah, okay, you have a friend. So we'll hit him with all the great.
I'm sure he gets that all the time. asking.
My life's perfect, but have a friend. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening today, guys. And thank you, Dana. And if you have not, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And the greatest compliment you can give Dana and I is a 5-star review, and to pass this podcast along to anybody that you think would benefit from these conversations. We would love to have you pass it along, and stay tuned for our next 4 key important elements to build trust and to give trust. And that will lead us up to eventually to Dr. Henry Cloud being our guest. So Dana, I'll see you next week.
Awesome. See you then.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.